So, I think one of the few things that is the hardest to learn about this character when you're first starting is just what do you do with most of your things? What do you do with your tools? What do you do with all that? How do you play neutral? All that stuff. What I see is people doing what seems to be the most intuitive thing, and it is unfortunately pretty backwards for this character. There's a few reasons for that, but what I want to go into is not just claiming those reasons. I want to try and prove it, like irrefutably prove it. I was watching Deb explaining Happy Chaos Neutral, and she was talking about like heavy reads, high reward gameplay versus like low rewards, high consistency, and I'm like, that's pretty interesting, but I want to do it for my character because this is super relevant for Amani. He's one of those characters that rewards you so much for playing that way and punishes you actively for not playing that way. So I want to highlight it and again just try to prove it, not just make the claim that you have to play that way. So we're going to start from I guess the point of view of a new Amani player. You just pick up this character, he has limbs, it's like Axel, I'm at home, we're zoner gang, we're in, let's go, alright? But what you don't know when you start playing this character is that you're actually playing a super bad risk reward by default. If you're playing this character like Axel or like Dalsim or just like, I have this big button, I'm a zoner, I play at this range, right? It's actually pretty bad. So let's go with what's the basic reward for hitting someone in a ground-to-ground interaction in the most fair way for Amani, right? Get something like this. Boom. 1.8k. Alright, cool. Let's try the other one. Something under conversion. Okay, 1.8k. And then you know, you get a frame trap. You get a tech trap from that. It could be a little bit more, right? If they don't tag. Blue beat tag. Okay, cool. If you hit with one of your ground normals, you get something like this. Oh, 1.8k. Okay. Maybe you get like the more optimal combo, but that's like spacing specific. So for the most part, we're just going to assume like we do 2,000 damage. Pretty reliably, right? That's just what we're going to assume. Maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. We gain some momentum. Let's look at Ragna. This is like the prototypical combo, right? Every Ragna can do this, round start, boom, or something like that, right? This has been a thing since forever. 2,000 damage. It's already a little higher than us, but you know, it's not too bad. Like, we have ways of making damage off of this, right? Like if we RC, right? Like it's a little higher, and Ragna can do the same, you know, basic something. I don't know the actual Ragna combos. But the point that I want to highlight is that Ragna will always beat you in terms of reward here. So like, I asked my Ragna friend, who I play a lot, and I've been hit by that combo, so I've just made sure to ask for the exact numbers because I don't know the combo myself. But if we're at round start and Ragna just goes like this, something like that, right? Full combo, I don't know the full combo, but there's a full combo. 4.5 thousand damage and a corner for playing with their best ground poke. Right? Amani's best ground poke in terms of like startup, I guess, and just playing at this mid-range in this fair interactive gameplay is 2B. Sure, you have the limbs, and the limbs are pretty far, but the limbs don't really lead to something unless you have like, you know, a reward. Not a reward, but a resource. And even if you have overdrive, like, yeah, you could do something like that, but the reward on overdrive is kind of bad. Right? I dropped the combo, but I was like barely at 3k. It would have been at probably 3.4, something like that. And we get drill level, yeah, that's something, but we're not drill level 3 quite yet, and this is just the start, right? Ragna already outmatches us in raw damage, right? Just raw damage. In momentum, I want to say that Ragna and generally the rest of the cast will also outclass us. The reason for that is I won't get too much into detail on this one because I would need to like explain the ins and outs of Amani's pressure, but Amani's pressure is pretty exploitable. He can get momentum, he can run over someone with a drill, but if you've labbed the countermeasures to Amane, you can take a lot of like low risk options to kind of mitigate it. So Amane is not a character whose primary strength is building momentum, right? Because it's exploitable. I'm sorry I can't prove that to you right now without taking like 15 minutes or more or preparing it, but please take me at my word. Ragna's not the most momentum driven, but he's kind of like the baseline, right? So his pressure for us, we don't have a reversal. Ragna has one. Our pressure is already a little more exploitable overall with the universal mechanics. Like dangerous for us, not just exploitable, right? So if both characters knock the other one down, one benefits a little bit more from the momentum than the other one, is what I'm trying to say, right? Ragna's not the best example, but if we're talking like Relius or Izanami or I don't know, another character like Carl that snowballs really hard, our lack of reversal means a certain death to some extent, and these characters can just like get a hit and just momentum, okie, get set play, win the game, right? So it's not just the raw damage that each character does, it's also their potential post that hit. Like after that hit, what do they get? And Amane, kind of not the best character to do that, right? How do you deal with Izayoi turtling with Fireball and DP zoning? I will get to that later. I have an example speaking specifically about Izayoi turtling. So I will get to that later. But for now, we're just explaining my thing in my order. Sorry about that. But stick around. There's a lot of good explanations for this. Yeah, no problem. Another thing that I want to point out is Amani doesn't really have a lot of consistent hooks for damage. In the sense that if you're playing like this ground game, I'm playing Axel, I'm zoning like this, right? You don't have a good way to consistently go into a high damage route, in my opinion. The high damage route would be probably something like this, which is pretty hard, requires like a good hit confirm, good height combination, and it requires them to be hit by like a 20 frame start at mid, which can happen, but you know. So there's that. The other one that Amane has is like if he hits you not point blank, but just outside of this into 6B, then you actually get like a good starter that does more than just 2k. But he doesn't have the usual Blaze Blue hooks for damage. What I mean by that is Ragna, if he's point blank, he can combo 5B into 6A. Normally this whiffs, but like if you have that, suddenly I don't have a full combo, but suddenly you do more than the basic 5B, 5C Hellsfang, right? So Ragna has more consistently access to higher damage than Amane. Not just Ragna, but the cast in general. Another thing that can happen is if you start playing these things... Oh, and I'll go a little bit further. Those characters can usually create those situations not just from the normal. Like, from this range, Ragna 5B doesn't go into these things, right? However, like, Ragna can just get a micro dash in from a jump in or something like that, right? And then get that full conversion. There's more than one to that. He can go into this, which gives him that link. I don't have that link, by the way, but that's just all I'm saying. Finally, if Ragna hits a character crouching, then he gets certain conversions that do more damage. And this is not a Ragna thing, this is kind of a Blaze Blue thing. Amane doesn't have that. That route I just described, this jump C forces standing. So even if Ragna was crouching, you don't have a crouching route at all. Plus, yeah, you could probably try and get the spacing to have 2B, 6B work, but Amani has a pretty slow dash. You might be hitting like your jumpy at peak range where you don't have time to do that. Like, it's just unreliable to get these things compared to the rest of the cast. So, okay, we're starting with a little bit of an idea. Okay, we're playing this zoning thing, and the opponent is consistently doing more damage for the same decisions. Like if we're playing with just our footsie tools and we're playing the ground game and we're playing the same game that they're playing, we're kind of losing on damage, and Amane doesn't carry momentum probably as well as some other characters. So already this is a disfavored interaction for us to play, right? It's kind of like, hey, this just happens that way. Well, maybe you have a counterpoint where you just go, I mean, you're playing from full screen. This is to balance things out. You're from full screen, you can do these things, you can control space and all of that, so you should have a lowered reward. I guess that's true. However, I want to compare frame data just to kind of disprove this. Just to go even further to illustrate just how much uneven this matchup is. Not this matchup, but like Amane versus the average tool to do something in Blaze Blue is, right? So we got the God button, Ragna 5B. This button is 8 frames, goes super far, super active. This is actually the God button. Probably none in the game truly compares to this. But one important thing to note is 8 frames for a standing poke is pretty common. It might not be like everyone's thing, but characters in this game have probably 10 frames startup pokes, right? Even this, that's 10 frames. So what does Amane have? Amane has a 10 frame 2-beat that, you know, maybe it interacts with this, but it doesn't appear to. Right? Okay, you can whiff punish with that 5B. That 5B is 11 frames. And it has longer recovery than a lot of the other buttons. So, okay, you can't really play ground footsies. Maybe you can play with this. Maybe. That's 15 frames. Meaning this button is almost twice as fast. For more rewards than if you're swinging with it. Unless you get like a counter hit or something like that. But it's like if you're playing both neutral, banking on counter hitting someone with a 15 frames move, while they have something better than you, not great. Not great. Let's go to these other things. These are 17 frames, I believe, maybe 18. So they're kind of useful. Ragna doesn't have a thing at that range. You know, it's not too bad. But 17 frames is a lot. Like, let's compare this to another zoning tool, right? News projectile, they're 15 frames. And that's when I did the short version, right? If I want to do like the max range version, this is 20 frame. This is 21 frame or 22. This is 23, if I'm not mistaken. So new chucking a projectile at you is 15 frames. Meaning if you're playing versus new, you're both zoners, and you press the button at the same time, like the odds are, or roughly the same time, the odds are the new player will hit you out of your buttons. So we're also losing that, huh? Okay. We're doing less damage, and our buttons are slower than stuff. Okay, well, I mean, we're still zoning. Maybe we're just, like, bad at it, I guess? There's more characters that have attacks in those ranges that are faster than Amane's C buttons. right? Or ground poke. So like Hazama's chains, I believe, are 16 frames. Relius throwing the doll wheel that has armor is 16 frames if the doll is out, 19 frame if it's not. And it's a terrible trade because that thing slides you on counter hit like crazy, and the first hit of 5C on counter hit has basically no on tech, no extended hit stun or anything like that. So you're taking more damage on these trades. Okay, what else do we have? Bang 3C, a full screen reaching low that goes under this button, 15 frame, 5 frame faster than this. Okay, Azrael Dash Punch, 13 frame at the minimum, 22 if it goes a little longer. But it goes, if I'm not mistaken, under this. And even if it didn't, the fact that it moves forward puts the character in the dead zone, right? So like, even Ragna could do something like this, right? And suddenly you're no longer controlling space efficiently. Ragna's getting a counter hit just for throwing that move from full screen because it's 15 frames. You're playing a slower move for a worse reward on average. Wait, this character sucks, right? Like, we're getting to the point where you're just fighting an uphill battle. We're not there yet. He has actual strength to play around this, but if you're not aware, you're actually playing this game. You're actually playing this game where nothing is good for you, right? But you can be aware of that, and we're gonna get there. The last comparison that I want to do is people compare this character to Axel a lot, and I think it's somewhat fair. But again, it's the most intuitive thing is just to say big limbs, so it's a zoner. The equivalent button for this on Axel, right? The equivalent like 1-hit or 2-hit button that whiffs on crouching is 7 frame. This is 17, and the 2-hit version is 20 frame. So Axel's buttons are 3 times as fast, just on this first one, right? The 2C, 21 frames for Amani, 11 frames for Axel, for the equivalent button. So twice as fast. 6C, that's 23 frames. And it's pretty big, but Axel's equivalent, 11 frames. For the button that hits in that spot. Again. And that's not even counting the fact that Amani has dead zones. There's going to be spaces where that button whiffs, and there's going to be characters whose forward running animation makes them duck under this button. Okay, this isn't how you're supposed to play this character. So, desperately waiting for the butt here. We're getting there. We're going to the butt. There's 2 things that you can do with Amani to solve this issue. Is everyone following so far? Is there any question? I'm kind of good at just going in a line and forgetting to maybe stop, maybe breathe. But the point that I wanted to make with those first few demos is just to say, like, if you're not aware, you're playing a very risky, a higher level of risk by playing neutral this way, or by, like, trying to play this character in a fair way, versus the reward also as well. They have a better reward than you when you play this way. So it's very uphill. So the next thing that you can do to do that, there's kind of 2 things. I've divided them into 2 ideas, but they overlap. They have some of the same merits. We'll go with stalemates first, right? Stalemate is kind of the ideal thing that you can do. I'm gonna go switch to Relius, I believe. Yeah. One thing that is great overall is that if an interaction like this exists for Amani, meaning you can take your guess, but you have like a skewed interaction where you're less likely than your opponent to hit, or you are doing less damage than your opponent for the same hit, or both. When that happens, you can just choose to not play those interactions. It starts from that. It honestly starts from that. So what I mean by that, for instance, Relius has this move. This move is a bully. If I throw out like a 5C and I don't stuff Relius prior to it, which right now is, I get counter hit and Relius can dash forward, get a full combo. So one thing that I can do is kind of just, you know, let that move rock. Literally, like, do nothing, work around that move. okay, I'm spacing myself here. If you throw that move from here or close enough, then I can maybe punch the doll, or I can maybe block it, hit the doll, and then move out, right? Or, like, that move isn't as useful if I'm above it. If I'm above it should be like your mantra. If Amane is above the opponent, he unlocks so many more of his options. But for now, we're just going to look at stalling. So how can you stall? Well, one, you have decent ground movement that, like, lets you move either backwards or forward or jump above things. When you do that, Amani's hurt box is really, really small. So it's kind of good to, like, dodge things. I'm pretty sure if I wanted, I could hop over that. Yeah. Maybe I hopped over the recovery. I'm not actually sure. Nope. Completely hopped over that. So there's a lot of ways to just circumvent neutral. Don't interact with your opponent unless the interaction is somewhat favorable for you, right? And the way you achieve that is just through movement. When you jump, you're super high. Characters can't reach you unless they do a super jump. And usually that means, like, they need to travel most of the screen because you're trying to protect the space in front of you, like with this button. So you're just trying to stalemate. Another thing that you can do to stalemate is you're trying to go full screen. You can force your opponent to make an action with this, or to force them to overextend, right? Not in every matchup, but in some matchups it's relevant. You get something for later in the match for you to have a better reward, so that when you do get to play those ground portal schemes, suddenly you're not doing, like, fair low damage, right? You're doing high damage. So that's one thing. If you get a life lead, it's also pretty good to stall like this, because it forces the opponent to overextend into a position where you can exploit that, which we'll see a little later. The other thing is, in this game there are a few characters that have, like, resources that are ongoing, and usually stalling for time mitigates those resources. I chose Relius for this example because as soon as the doll is out, she starts losing meter, and Relius Neutral kind of... It's not Relius that goes in, it's kind of just him sending the doll and creating favorable situations from that, right? If you're actively stalling versus Relius, you can force him to expand, like, a ton of doll meter just trying to tag you once while you're just, like, dancing at the top of the screen, not giving a single fuck. And what this creates for Relius is, as soon as he gets that hit, he's going to be really low on doll meter, which means his momentum from the first hit is actually lowered. We talked about that idea earlier, right? It's not just the damage they get, it's the damage they're allowed to get from the following situation. Relius's damage and opportunities are directly scaled with this doll meter. So, like, a typical Relius block string is going to look something like, you know, something like this. I got to do, like, I don't know, 3-4 of them. You can do jump cancels, you can do mix-ups in there, boom, something like that, right? So I did, like, what, 6 punches, 7 punches? Well, if Relius starts at half doll meter because he's chasing you like this, and he's sending this, and then he's trying to force you to block this, and then you punch the doll, she takes a bit of damage, she's unsummoned, he resummons her, and now he gets a hit. I got 3 instead of 7. That's the length of his block strings. That's possibly the length of his conversions, and it's also going to force him to use things like combos that go into overdrive because they recover the doll. So Relius is already a lower reward character if you're just wasting time at neutral. This is good for you, right? And so there's an incentive versus characters like that to just stall. Even versus normal characters, there's an incentive to stall, to force them to overextend, or to play favorable risk-reward. But specifically versus these matchups, it's like, provably, if you stall like this, they get less damage, and this is good for you. Because when you play the same interactions that are skewed, they're suddenly less skewed. So here's an example of those characters. Hazama's, if he wastes his chains and moving, eventually he won't be able to cancel the chains. So if you let a chain whiff, then you can just maybe whiff punish it or something like that. So he gets a lot more predictable where he's standing on screen. Relius with the doll, pretty simple example. Valkenhayn. Valkenhayn is one of those characters where can do mix-up if you're not in Wolf. It's that straightforward. So if you're just letting him move around at neutral, wasting Wolf meter, that's good for you. He gets less opportunities afterwards. Carl, if you punch the doll, same thing. He has to wait a little bit or use overdrive to rebuild it. Rachel is going to put a bunch of garbage on screen, so if she throws a George at you, just go fly above. You know, maybe the George will activate if you get near him, but then go away. Just stalling for resources. If she hits you with half meter, that's less pressure for her. If Bang is throwing nails at you, jump above them. Same thing. Bang doesn't recover the nails, so just let him waste it. Another one of my favorite is Izanami. Will this be uploaded to YouTube? Yes, I will. I will upload this to YouTube. I think I have to wait a day, but I will make sure this is on YouTube. Another one of my favorite is Izanami Ribcage. If Izanami activates Ribcage from full screen, there's a timer on which that is active. And then you can just hop around, and most of what she'll do is just like chuck projectiles and hope that you block them in the air and fall. But you have so many air options that it doesn't really matter. And 5 seconds later, her ribcage was kind of weak, lowered her barrier. That's good for the chip damage character. And if she gets a hit, she doesn't corner carry you into the corner, into ribcage, because she doesn't have as much. So we're just stalling. We're just stalling and we're making characters weaker already, right? I have a few more examples. It's like Mu12 setting lasers to an extent. You can kind of just mitigate that a little bit, but for her it's a bit weird because she can just keep placing lasers, so you can't stall forever, sadly, versus her. Nine's Fairy. Nine's Fairy is like one of my favorite. Where's 9? I think it was the other way around. I used to play a lot versus 9 because we have a local 9. And Amani has like a specific movement patterns that dodges Fairy. Magical weapon, is it that? No. Boo -boo -boo. Magic slot. Can't I choose something? Ah, okay, I see. I see how it works. So I'm guessing it's red? Yeah. So she does this, the first one goes diagonal, the second one goes horizontal, and the last one is vertical. So you just do this, jump, then jump above the second one, and then move horizontally for the last one. So it looks like... And boom, Fairy's gone. And it's not like 9 can replenish Fairy, right? So if there's a Fairy on screen, you just move around, let it whiff, and then you can play a Fairy interaction after that. So that's for stalling. We're gonna go to another matchup really quickly. We're gonna go to like Bullet. I think Bullet's a pretty simple example. By the way, this stuff isn't specific to Amani. The way I explain how you do it is specific to Amani, but like you can play this way with any character, by the way. I don't know how to charge up with her. No. She has the move where she goes like, ah! We'll find it. Bullet. Afterburner? Yeah, that's the one. Alright. Bullet's just gonna go like, I want to do this so I can have a bigger circle when I go in and B+ and harass you a little better, right? So you can't completely stall versus these characters. Like if you're at the top of the screen, Bullet is just gonna build a resource that's not good for you, right? You can raise these characters sometimes with drill level, like let them go full screen and just, you know, make your own interaction a little higher, but that's just boosting the reward for both players. So sometimes you do have to chase them. You can't stall completely, but you can still somewhat do it, you know. It's not too bad. It's just there are a few situations where stalling has a bit of a drawback. So that was the first one. The second one, we're going to talk specifically about reducing the opponent's rewards. It's not just stalling. It's playing in a way where the only thing they can get on you is the inverse of the interactions we were comparing earlier. You know how I was saying, like, Amani has worse buns than everybody else in a fair interaction way. He has worse zoning than the zoners, you know, that type of stuff. And that made risk reward bad for Amani. We want to inverse that. We want to do that to the opponent, right? So Amani is really good at this because as long as he's playing air to ground and air to air and movement based, all of his toolkit just clicks together and it starts making sense and it starts complementing everything. So whenever there's like a spot that's exploitable, when you play this way, you have a super efficient answer versus that, right? As opposed to just like you're playing uphill with these buttons. No, it's more like, oh, okay, they've started doing this, so I need to do this. Oh, I missed the follow. I missed the follow alert. Thanks for the follow, not prepares. So jump B, jump A, they're pretty good button neutral just because of how big they are on screen. Like there's not a character that can represent this type of hitbox this fast from anywhere. You don't necessarily get much from it, right? But it forces the opponent to play a different way because you're gonna accumulate a bunch of little damage this way. You're gonna accumulate a bit of meter. Maybe you'll get a counter hit. And so the next time you play interactions that are normally like not super favored for you, like those ground interactions, you'll actually have something to show for it, right? So it's not just playing a good interaction in of itself, it's also building towards something else. I kind of got sidetracked a little bit there. Let me just get back to where I was on my notes. So yeah, let's take a common footsie situation. Ragna's gonna dash at you and do his best footsie button, right? This thing, and we know we can't quite beat it. So how do we do that? Well, you can make it whiff, right? And then let me just set the dummy to block. You can make it whiff by just like jumping around, right? And then you have frame advantage because you're not trying to interact with that button. You're trying to make it whiff on purpose. Boom! I whiff punished that. Sweet! Right? Or you're just gonna get away, right? Oops. I guess I'll just jump, right? Or I'll jump back air dash. And then it's like, you get away. You get your opportunities to do something because you're not interacting with the button. You're letting them do something and overextend and something like that. Or you're just... Oops. Ragna's 5B is actually pretty good at like hitting above you, but like you could side switch, you can move on the screen. This kind of overlaps a little bit with the stalemating, but for the most part, when you start playing this way, right? What does Ragna have to do to get like a clean hit here to stop you from doing this, right? Or to stop you from doing something like this? Like he can't dash forward if you do this, right? Okay, maybe you can, but like it's not bad for you. Oh, maybe you can actually just jump back and do something like that. So if you're doing something like this, oops, let's try and snipe the attack on screen. There you go. If you're doing something like this, what does Ragna have to do to stop you from doing that? If he doesn't have the like trained or research answers for this, he's kind of going to be flailing buttons, and they're not going to hurt. What's going to happen is like the Ragna is going to try and do something like dash up, air throw, right? And okay, you can be ready for that, but you can still like stuff that if they fail doing it, right? And a counter hit starts becoming pretty favorable for you, right? Like you can probably do something else from that, or just hit confirm it, you know. Something like that. Okay, well, maybe he can go above, right? And start doing something like this. Yeah, I mean, it's possible, but at the same time, like, you should be able to see Ragna doing like a super jump to move around your big move to try and snipe you in the air, right? And even then, at the top of the screen, does the Ragna player have his conversions from this jump C height, right? I still stuffed it, you know. I don't think it's a bad interaction. But from the point of view of Ragna, what's going to happen is he's going to do something either like this. I'm going to get hit on purpose. Oops. And then he does this, that does a knockdown. It's only 2,000 damage. But he has to, like, hard commit to an overextension. He has to jump up and do, like, some super YOLO, I'm going to catch you, right? That's what happens when they don't have, like, a trained research answer. And even then, I was just trying out timing, and sometimes my jump B was winning, right? Or trading, or something like that. So, the risk is a little more in your favor. The reward is a little more skewed. The opponent maybe doesn't have a great combo from there, right? Maybe the Ragna actually knows something, right? Like, maybe, but do they have that conversion? Most of the time, you'll be above them, like pretty high, just because Amani jumps so high. And it's a very awkward spot, which means you'll get a lot of resets. One thing that can happen pretty regularly is like Ragna's gonna do this block string, right? And I'm gonna get hit standing or airborne by the 5B. And the 5C can whiff because Amani is slim or something like that, right? It's not just a matter of they need to research their thing, it's a matter of they need to know exactly what to do, and even if they know, sometimes they'll drop. Sometimes they'll drop their stuff, sometimes their character is not equipped to have a combo conversion that makes sense when you're above them. So you're effectively playing to control space this way, because they can't get something as good started on you. Kind of the only thing they can get is maybe momentum, right? While you can get probably the same or better than your grounded interactions, like we were saying earlier. If an air tech happens, this is even better for you. I think you can definitely get better at this over time, but Amani air teching with air options, like I'm doing this and then this air techs, right? Like I'm the king of air to ground interactions, and if you give me a scramble, this jump 2B is coming out. Or my favorite one is they drop an air combo and you air tech and you just go this into 50 meters, which is a pretty good starter, right? And it happens from a situations like them overcommitting to something and dropping because you're playing neutral in spots that are really hard to hit, right? And this is a decent starter. So you're creating more drops for your opponent, you're creating lower damage, you're taking less risk because you're overall standing pretty far from them. This is starting to look pretty good, right? Let's go to the next thing. And we know that if the opponent is trying to do answers to that, we'll probably either catch them pretty regularly, or they'll need to research things. So let's see how a player can actually start exploiting this, right? I'm going to jump back, jump B, or actually I'm going to backdash, neutral jump, jump B. Yep. I think it would help if I did that. We'll see. Okay, I'm gonna stand here. Bear with me as I try to create this situation. Boom! You see how far that was? Boom! So there are trained answers that people can do, right? Because of the attribute system, you can throw an anti-air and hit Amane out of his jump B, which is just a big hurt box overall. But consider what they need to do to beat you this way, right? They need to anti-air at a timing that's pretty much Amani specific. I don't think any other characters can represent a hurt box that can be anti-aired from this spot. They can probably do like a dive kick and then you get ready to anti-air it, but you have to anti-air Amani like really preemptively to do this, right? And if you choose to not do that button, then it's like, okay, they just whiffed 6A in front of me, right? This is what I meant earlier by, this is where Amani's toolkit starts to click together, because every time you have a fail point like this, you have something that is pretty low commitment to throw out, and that will interact super well with this. So, same thing, we're gonna have Ragna just whiff a 6A. Oh, we whiff punish that, right? Like, let's make sure he blocks. Oh, we whiff punish that. Okay, he did that thing, and suddenly I either get a knockdown, I spend 50 meter to get maybe the corner, maybe I get more. One of my favorite ways to beat this is it's like, if I do this, and he stuffs me, then I can just do this, and that's a whiff punish. So I didn't even change my option, I just changed the timing at which he needs to press the button. I think this is good for you. I think this is good for Amani because it makes taking those risks much more read dependent. They're not really looking for you jumping around and reacting to something, or they're like targeting if they are reacting, but they're essentially taking a read that you're going to have a pattern like this that can be exploited. So you can just change your timings. That's one thing that you can do. Another one is you can use additional movement to just stall a little bit longer to force a different timing, or to just interact better with certain things, right? Like, I can jump over here and let that 6A whiff. Suddenly Ragna has to do something different, right? Because if Ragna is there and I'm doing this, or I'm doing this, then he needs an answer that's a little different for both, right? Maybe 6A has a timing that can beat both buttons, but I can still like, I can still stall further, right? So the Ragna has to commit to something here to beat us reliably. If he doesn't, we can kind of just keep doing it, right? Like, this is skewed towards us. Maybe not in reward, but in risk, it's definitely skewed towards us. So I think that's a great thing. Let's go another one. Let's go another example. Okay. I was showing J2B. J2B is pretty good for looking like you're going to be in the air and actually coming back to the ground. So if Ragna starts doing like this anti-air that I'm showing, right, you can kind of just let it whiff and take your turn. So even if you don't get a punish, you can probably leverage J2B like that to get frame advantage and to start your turn. This is an example of what I mean by don't interact with your opponent until you can create a situation that's favorable. This is a favorable situation. They whiff the button. And at the best, you get a punish, right? So that should be your goal. That should be something that's pretty good. And again, if you start doing this, the Ragna has to start doing something like reading the timing at which you do the 2B, the J2B, dash in anti-air. And sometimes the J2B will clash. So even if the Ragna knows this stuff, you could still, it's still somewhat favorable because the tools you're representing are just strong overall. Another one that he can start doing is he'll let the jump 2B whiff, right? Like if Amani just does this, then there's a tiny bit of recovery just to hit the ground. And so Ragna can just choose, I'm letting that move whiff, and as soon as you whiff it, I'm dashing in 5B. Doesn't get a punish, but he gets his offense started, right? He gets momentum. But again, if the Ragna player is looking for something like that, then you're probably back to, oh, so my jumpy is just gonna keep him there, right? And from jump B, you have like pretty good options. I mean, you can cancel into jump D if you're straight up above them, and you still have hops. You can jump cancel. I think on block you can't hop cancel. On hit you can, but you can still go like J2C. If you have 50 meter, this is a party starter. So that's pretty good. So now, we know the opponent can beat us, but they need like trained answers. Another one that I like is as soon as people start doing like air grabs to try and catch your jump B, the jump 2B is also, even without targeting it, is good versus that, because the Ragna is just going to do something like this, right? And suddenly they jump forward expecting you to be there. You're not actually there because you're just stalling, or you know, you're doing something like this, and then they whiff something critical and you get an opportunity to get started, right? By not even targeting that, you're just like moving around here controlling space, and if they choose to commit to something, it's your turn. Even if they have answers, these remain strong options. Yeah. The thing that I start to like about this is not just that these are favorable interaction, is that these become leverage for your ground game, right? Remember earlier I was saying like these are not gray buttons, these are skewed. You're not actually playing an even risk reward or anything like that. When you play versus an opponent that starts respecting your air movement a lot, they become cautious. They stick where they are, right? They do a lot of dash breaking, a lot of non-committal movement, which is a prime opportunity for you to start like taking control of the match on the ground. If the Ragna is like from full screen and he's not sure how to get in and he's being patient and he's doing something like that, right? Let's try something like this. Right? No, let's make it look a little more convincing. Something like this. Right? A cautious Ragna. He's just waiting for you to do your stuff, right? And you're jumping and you're bullying him and oh, you whiff something, it's my turn, right? Well, one thing that starts happening is you can have a better read on their movement patterns to start using your C buns, to start using your D buns, and that's when a lot of those better rewards happen. Just because, A, you're more likely to get a hit, suddenly it's a little more even. You don't want to lead your gameplay with those tools, but eventually they become, like, less risky to throw out, if that makes sense. Because you established this strong movement game, right? If you get a counter hit with certain of these tools, you get like a pretty good reward actually, right? I didn't get the full combo, but that's like close to 3k, or just corner carry, something like that, right? Or, you know, you're playing neutral versus the Ragna, and suddenly you get this counter hit, which again, not that much damage, but it's suddenly less risk to throw it out because the Ragna is being cautious, because you know that he's going to be there at that moment. And again, it's not just Ragna, it's every character in the game. All of that. And I probably mentioned it earlier, but you have a better chance when playing that way to just have 50 meter when you choose to go for those interactions. So, oops. Something like this. And suddenly you're doing a lot more damage than you were prior. It's an extra 1,000 damage rather than just 1.8k. Or it's the corner, or it's something else. Which is super relevant. This also applies if you're at low HP. There's a mechanic in this game that when you're... I don't know the exact HP range, but at some point your meter bar starts flashing white. If you just stall, you gain meter, right? Like, if I put this at 3 and reset, for just doing nothing, Amane is building meter overall, right? So, that's another incentive for stalling, that's another incentive for not taking risks at some point. You just have a higher chance of having 50 meter for when it matters. Okay. I'm gonna reset myself a little mentally, because I was starting to go off rails a lot here. Are there any questions so far? Okay, I want to highlight 2 other benefits of controlling space with jump B, J2B, and your movement. Just letting things happen below you and choosing when to pick your spots. When you play versus the top tier characters, it actually makes your game plan less risky. No, I wouldn't say that. Okay, let's try and make it a bit better. I think Amane is in this mid-tier spot because this style of neutral does well versus the top tier. Some characters like Bullet aren't actually that bad. They're kind of like normal man character with deficiencies, but to trade off those deficiencies, they hurt like crazy. But those deficiencies versus the neutral of the top tier characters who have like a lot of screen presence is what makes the weaker characters weak on tier lists, I would say. Amani is usually a bit higher than them, and that's because this style of neutral is good versus the top tiers. I wouldn't say this makes them like favorable matchups, but it's pretty livable, you know? If they touch you, they gain so much momentum that they can win off of that, and that's actually scary, but the fact that you can play neutral doesn't... it's pretty welcome, you know? So, I was playing this as Yanami the other day, right? I was jumping around and doing, okay, I'm gonna go into my mode, and now I'm gonna throw this out, and you're not gonna deal with this. Like, I'm just jumping around, right? And this Izanami is trying to chase me, and I'm just like, bye, right? And I didn't win the interaction there, but now she's suddenly in a mode where she can block versus a character that has like... Oops. Versus a character that has like a crazy dive kick. Right, like she can't block this if I connect with it. Okay, that's pretty good. We like that. If I actually block this thing, not bad. It's not a lot of blocks done. I still get most of my air options, so I'm not in trouble, right? I'll try and do one with still my double jump. Ooh. Right? Like, it's still pretty favored for me after that. And Izanami was one of those characters where I think like the only thing that she gets... is it that? Yeah. The only knockdown that she gets from like a high hit is going straight into this. And I don't think at the top of the screen this hit leads to much. Most of her stuff will be like mid-screen combos that corner carry you into Ribcage, into Oki. You know, I think you're mitigating a lot of that momentum by playing passively. You're mitigating a lot of her non-committal screen presence that she has in this, right? You're just sidestepping it entirely, like, right? Okay, cool. I just jumped, right? Like it's gone. Or another one. Is it this? I'm looking for the spinny thing. That one. Yeah. She'll maybe try and pin you down with that, and it's like, sorry, I'm out, you know? I'm not even interacting with that. And so I like that versus a lot of the top tier characters, like versus 9. She's kind of floaty and she has to chase you. You can kind of reset a lot. It's comfortable. You can throw C buttons at her. It's not that bad. Versus Izanami, you're not necessarily throwing C buttons, but again, it's easy to tag her in a mode where she can block with this. And it's pretty easy to not give her rewards for having good screen presence. That's not too bad. There's probably a few more examples. Like I think you can bully Carl's doll pretty well. So that's another one of the benefits. If you play like this, it's good versus the top tiers. The second one that will probably help. When you have a character that has like uphill interactions, what I mean by that is like the stuff I was talking about earlier, where your tools kind of suck and you feel like it's a uneven matchup, it's bad for you, you have to work harder, all of that. That can be very, very soul-crushing. To play that style of character, to play that play style overall. Reason for that is as soon as your opponent gets momentum, it's kind of like, oh, it's over. I need like even much more to win now. Oh man, I can't come back. It's too much, right? If you're playing to like just waste time, avoid situations, play passively, use the full 99 seconds. Make sure your opponent hits you for at most 500 damage, get an air attack, and all of those things. If you play to maximize that, you're also overcoming one of the weaknesses that Amane has. I said earlier that his pressure is pretty exploitable, and he has a bit of a harder time like carrying momentum into the next decision. If you're very comfortable resetting back to neutral, if you're very comfortable stalling and playing this playstyle and taking your time, then you're taking less risks in an area of the character that is exploitable, right? So like, what I mean by that is, if you hop forward, I won't go too much into detail because that's like another 30 minutes, probably, at the speed I'm talking. But if you do something like hop forward resets, that's anti-airable. Your opponent is not even forced to do that. They can kind of just like barrier block you out and force you to make like super predictable decisions to stay in, or super high commitment decisions to stay in. So they can take like a lot of non-risks to go back to neutral. But if you're comfortable with your neutral, and if you're comfortable thinking this is the best part of the character, then you're actually fine with that. You won't actually hit someone and be like, this is my knockdown. I gotta go for 6D. I gotta go for the 3D and the thing, and I gotta make them block the drill and all. Like, no, you're not thinking like that. You're not taking these super risky decisions because you feel like you're playing an uphill battle. No, I mean, okay, they pushed me out of the drill. I'll go back to neutral. I'll just stick this on screen, and next time I hit you, it's gonna hurt. But I like neutral better than my own pressure versus certain players. I don't know. I'm doing a face. I don't know what to add here. But hopefully you get a bit of the point. That was the most of it. I'm going to go into a bit more examples here. Just a little last part to include. Because yes, you want to stall. Yes, you want to do things in a certain way to reduce risk. The next thing that you want to do is you want to lean into certain movement options based on the matchup. A lot of the ways you interact with your opponent also includes movement, right? You're not just reducing risk via movement, you're also interacting with them via movement. And that sometimes means that you need to preemptively be somewhere to answer something. Because Amani is slow, right? Let's not kid ourselves. This is very floaty movement, very drawn out. And there are better ways to interact with a certain thing. So you want to move in a way that makes it still possible to be there, to be in the right spot at the right time. Let's take a super simple example, right? Jin's Fireball, sometimes they'll jump, they'll do this. This controls kind of a lot of space because it either forces you to, let's just make sure that Jin blocks. He's blocking, alright. This forces you to either stay there. If you're throwing out buns, they'll kind of knock you down or give some momentum to Jin, anything like that, right? And if Jin throws it out, I didn't throw it out super well right here. Yeah, that's good. If Jin throws it out and you're kind of like not ready to chase him, you're like here and he's like, oh, he's gonna do Fireball. Maybe you're actually gonna get tagged by the Fireball itself, right? It's hard to demonstrate, but I just want to like say that if you're here when he throws the Fireball, right? Okay, that should be a little easier. If you're here while he threw the Fireball and you're moving backwards, you can't actually interact with the Fireball, right? Oh shit, I can't. I don't have anything. okay, well, maybe you can hop forward, but you don't get a punish, right? In certain matchups, characters will have tools like this that has an answer. In this case, the answer is just 2C, because it'll duck under the fireball. If you're far, it's still pretty friendly because Jin moves a little backward during his fireball, and 2C is the max range one. If you do 5C, you have a chance of being stuffed by the fireball, right? Unless you did it super preemptively. But you don't want to use the C-buns this way. You want to use the C-buns as a reaction to something to punish them. But to do that, you need to make sure you're likely to be in the spot where you can punish that. Like, I can't punish the Jin fireball from this height. I just can't, right? Maybe I can YOLO something like this, right? But again, I could get hit depending on where I am, and I'm not starting something. So versus Jin, a lot of what I'm going to do is oftentimes very aggressive J2Bs to go back to the ground. What this allows me to do is, if something like this happens, I'm more likely to be ready to punish it. It's not that I want to, like, abuse it, right? But it's more like I want to be ready in case he does that without looking like I'm ready. Like, I can still do the rest of the zoning options, I can still do all of that, but if I do 25% more of these, if he throws a fireball, it actually shuts it down. And now he has to interact with the rest of the game. Maybe it's not 25%, maybe it's 10, maybe it's something like that. But you just want to lean into something that interacts well with what your opponent is throwing at you. In this case, it was Jin's fireball. We want to be under it. We want to 2C the recovery. And then get something. I'll go over a few more examples just because it's very different from character to character. Earlier, Xavier asked me about Izayoi. We're going to go to Izayoi. This is where the Izayoi example is in. Because the moves themselves have, like, quirks that will that you want to care about. So we're going to have Izayoi be pretty far and just throw this fireball, right? She's here, and she kind of goes back a little bit, or she can be airborne sometimes. Or you're playing at this range because you don't want Izayoi to get in, and because she goes back, like, your 5C is kind of not reaching her, we'll say. Right? Like, if you're here and you're not ready to go forward, oh, and you only get one hit sometimes or something like that, you could go 2C, but then it's like your 2C is even slower. So maybe you're airborne and, oh man, I can't land and do 2C, right? The example from Jin earlier doesn't work as well because I can't duck under the fireball. So versus her, what I like to do is just, like, stay in the air and poke with jump C, which can be a little hard because sometimes you're here and you're not actually in range. But if you do it well, like, at least the fireball whiffs, right? So that's kind of what I mean by, like, you need to stand in different spots and have different movement options available to interact well with something that you can actually punish. It's not just a matter of you need to jump C this, right? It's a matter of you need to be here at this height, right? At this height pretty often so that if she throws a fireball, you have a jump C ready. And it goes even further than that. If you're zoning and stalling like this, right, and she throws something, then you need to have an air dash ready so that you can actually have a chance of catching her if she's further out. If she's further away from you. So that means keep your double jump. That means maybe it means hopping forward from here, right? Just so that you can create the spacing a little bit better. You want to lean on those options in your unpredictable movement, in your stalling, in your way that you control space in the air from here. Does that make sense? It's a little hard to convey the general point without it becoming like, here's how you interact with this move. I'm gonna go for one last example on this. Kokonoe is a character that sometimes will create a favorable situation at neutral this way, which is just she goes back, she sets a Gravitron, or rather, she sets a Gravitron, she goes back, and then she throws a fireball, right? And then as Amane, Gravitron messes up with your air movement, and if you block the air fireball, it's not super desirable. And then Kokonoe kind of gets a more favorable situation after that. So one way that we can beat her is we need to, like, very aggressively run forward, because I don't know if you saw there, the Magnetron, the Gravitron pulls me back on 5C. So it's not enough to be in 5C range, I need to be closer than 5C range. And I need to do that ahead of time, so that if she wants to go for that option, I'm actually in range. Because otherwise I'm not going to be in range, right? Like if I'm here, maybe I have that, but that's like super hard reaction or read, I guess. I don't know, I don't feel super confident just throwing that out randomly. Or being like, oh yeah, she's gonna do that. And maybe she's just gonna be on the ground. Like maybe she just like backdashes and does this, right? And so that doesn't work. So for her, I have to consider staying within this range, because she's always like one decision away from creating this situation, right? And if I'm in the air, it's a little awkward to just like chase her doing this. It's possible, but it's a little awkward, right? Like the Gravitron pulls me down. Yeah, maybe I can do that, but then I have weird forward momentum. Like, I don't know if you saw, but Amani was reeling backwards, even if the Gravitron was gone. Right? Like, there's still momentum. So the best way that I found to answer that is I need to create more often the situation where I'm on the ground and I can chase her, so that if she does that, I get a counter hit. Or I don't let her get started, rather. But that's an answer that's like specific to each move. I could go over every character that has stuff like that, and it's like, oh, Kagura's Fireball kind of whiffs under 5C range, so I can 2C it. Something like that. Celica has a ground Fireball, so my jump C starts becoming a little more helpful versus it. It becomes specific to every character, but the guiding principle is tailor your movement so that even if you're not targeting one of their options in the matchup, you're more likely to be able to react to that option and target it and counter hit it. Whew. I think I did everything. I think I've explained everything that I wanted to explain today. So I'm just gonna conclude it, wrap it up, repeat all my points very, very quickly. So the most intuitive way that people play this character is as if he's Axel low, you do the limbs, you throw out big commitment moves, and what happens is your reward is worse and your risk is worse than your opponent. So it's a very skewed interaction that's uphill for you and makes the character feel very weak. Instead, you want to proactively avoid situations. Just don't let the opponent get started, create distances, maintain that distance, and kind of wait until the game state is favorable for you, or rotate through your air to ground options, as they are very difficult to prevent, even if you know how. And lastly, lean on your movement options that are favorable for you to interact with a specific piece of a matchup. So if it's Jin, your 2C deals with the Fireball. Be ready to be in 2C scenario. So that means more jump 2Bs versus characters that have a ground Fireball, more air movement above the Fireball. Rachel's an example that's the opposite. She throws like Lobelias. So staying on the ground and using your ground buns kind of prevent her from doing that. Stuff like that.